Delighted to be joined right now by the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Minister, Nadhim Zahawi. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Well, let's start up with, first of all, with what you're talking about this morning. The Community Secretary, Robert Jenrick, is announcing today communities across 7 areas in England are set to benefit from up to £179 million in new town deals. Tell us what that is and who's affected.
Yeah, absolutely. It is 7 towns, so places like Blackpool and Warrington and Torquay and Peterborough will all get the first tranche of £180 million. The total investment is £3.6 billion in 101 towns. The investment in Blackpool is £39 million, which will go towards 2 things. One, the Blackpool illuminations will get a complete facelift, which generates so much visitor income and, of course, local growth, as well as a enterprise zone at the airport. In Peterborough, they're looking at green, clean growth and a decarbonised living. In Torquay, it's an investment in retail. In Warrington, it's an investment in skills. So this is an exciting first tranche of 180 million of 3.6 billion that's going into these towns. By the way, 45 of those towns are in the Northern Powerhouse region and 30 are in the Midlands Engine region.
Okay, I mean, it all sounds well and good. However, what is the point of spending money in places like Blackpool that you've just put into Tier 3, closing down businesses that are viable just about now after all the lockdowns we've had already, and then saying we're going to give you some money when all the businesses are going to be closed down by the time everyone comes out of these restrictions?
Well, first of all, the 3.6 billion is part of the long-term infrastructure spend into Blackpool and Warrington and other parts of the country, which is very much part of our strategy for leveling up opportunities. But we also have to deal with the virus. And Julia, you will know this because you've heard me say it before. This is a balance between the harm of the virus. So it's balancing 2 harms: the harm of the virus and the harm to the economy and well-being of the country. So our priority is to protect lives and make sure the NHS can cope in areas like Warrington and Blackpool.
Why wouldn't the NHS be able to cope? What are the excess deaths at the current time?
Sorry, say that again.
Why do you think the NHS wouldn't cope? I mean, we're 8 months in. I think the NHS should be able to cope by now. What are the excess death numbers? We want to protect life, absolutely. What are the excess death numbers at the moment? How many extra people are dying currently, right now, than would normally be dying at this time of year?
You're asking me that question because your next question would be the excess deaths are flat, pretty much no excess deaths in the country. I know where you're coming from, but the reality.
Well, coming from with facts. I know a lot of interviews aren't keen on those these days, but
I'm the business and industry minister. I do not do this for fun to put parts of the country in Tier 3, the highest tier.
Why are you doing it then?
Because you're seeing the rates of increase of infection in areas like Warrington is at 361 per 100,000. And if you look at what's happened in other parts of the world, whether it's France or Spain, where the virus has, infection rates have risen rapidly, you suddenly get that leakage into the 60 and over age group, an increase which is delayed by probably about 2 weeks of hospitalization and ultimately deaths. That's why we're doing it.
The reality is we always see a seasonal uplift in September and October in respiratory diseases. We're seeing virtually no flu at the moment. Everything is going to COVID. People are getting COVID positive tests. It's very, very sad, and some people will die. That happens every single year. No one more is dying right now than would normally die at this time of year as a result of these diseases. Is it really justifiable to be shutting down huge parts of our economy, so throwing this extra money at these towns like Blackpool, Warrington, having already gone into Tier 3, when at the same time you are effectively taking actions which will close down those businesses, ruin people's lives, people losing their jobs, and as we saw from the first lockdown, we have absolute 100% proof will cost more lives, non-COVID lives, than it will save of those who die from COVID. Why on earth does the government think it is justified to have these sort of restrictions?
Well, there's a lot there in your question to unpack. Let me start with businesses. If an area goes into Tier 3, then we will support businesses both with a £3,000 grant for every month that they are in that tier, as well as their employees with 2/3 of their salaries covered, plus an additional top up from Universal Credit for them. And of course, help directly to the local authority. Warrington's getting £4.2 million additional help for businesses. So there's help.
They say they need 7 million.
I know. Let me just get in tier 2. We've increased the help there as well. The Chancellor's looked at the job support scheme again, made it much more generous, where the employer only has to pay 5% and the employee only has to work 1 day a week to be able to keep their job, and the government will stand behind them, and grants of over £2,000 for every month that they remain closed. We have to be able to balance these two harms, Julia. If we don't do anything and the virus just lets rip.
Oh, this phrase again, seriously.
Well, hold on a second.
I mean, could you have more respect for my listeners than use that phrase? No one is suggesting that. I'm getting really fed up with this idea. We have to have restrictions on people's lives, or we let the virus rip. Those are not the only two choices.
Then you're right, and the middle choice is these local tiered interventions, working with local leaders, is the best way, rather than a one-size-fits-all for the whole of the country, which is deeply damaging for the economy. So if we all do the right thing, if we work together, I think we can get through this. There is already, and I have to be cautious here, but we're seeing the rate of increase of infections slowing down.
It was already doing that before we had the tiers introduced.
Well, the good sign is that it is slowing down.
So those tier restrictions weren't necessary. That's my point.
It's still too high. It is still too high.
It's still too high. We haven't got excess deaths, and these and the rates of infections was going down before we had these restrictions brought in. But that still justifies the restrictions. Do you understand why so many people find that hard to believe?
Yes, and I would say to them, look at what's happened in countries like Spain and France, where if we don't take action early, then the number of infections rise way above the 20.
Hold on a minute. Spain and France had much deeper, longer, earlier lockdowns than us, and they're still facing the same problem. Doesn't that tell you that these sort of restrictions don't work? I don't, with all due respect, Minister, I don't think you believe they work.
I absolutely believe they work. I
don't believe you. I don't think an awful lot, from what I'm hearing from Cabinet and from government ministers generally, I don't think many do actually believe that this is working, and they feel they're being pressured into this by public opinion polling, which thinks for some reason this stuff does work.
That is absolutely not true. What we do is we look at the data. The virus in different areas is increasing in different at different levels, and we take action accordingly in the three-tiered system. I think that's the right way to deal with this. We want to get the country to as normal a place as possible, as quickly as possible, and the way to do it is to follow the hands, face, space, the rule of 6 in those tiered areas, to look at which tier you're in, to follow the rules there. That's how we get through this, and we will get through it, Julia, and we'll come out the other end much stronger with a strong. Yes, I do. I absolutely.
What about these 55 Tory MPs, the Northern MPs, Northern Research Group, who've written to the Prime Minister? It's in the front page of some of the papers today, saying, look, what is the exit strategy from this?
Well, they are quite rightly passionate about their constituencies. One, any area that enters tier 3, whether it's Warrington or Manchester or elsewhere, within that agreement with the local leaders is a review after 28 days. So we look at the evidence, we look at how the virus is spreading and increasing, and hopefully it isn't, it's coming down, the rate of increase. We want to get the R number to 1, and we do that by working together. They also believe in an investment in their areas. And the announcement I was making today, £180 million to 7 towns, 101 towns in total. 45 of them will be in Northern Powerhouse constituencies. And of course, our hospital building programme, 14 of those will be in Northern Powerhouse constituencies. And the biggest of the sort of the levelling up announcements is the PM's announcement on skills, which I know MPs like Jake Berry are absolutely passionate about. Where if you are at any age, at any stage, you can reskill and upskill to take the advantage of the opportunities available, and the government will stand behind you and pay for that upskilling.
What about the concern about that levelling up isn't happening when you've got 1 million or 2 million children who are going hungry during the school holidays? Lots of people are expecting there will be a U-turn from the government over this free school meal vouchers. Huge sort of public outcry over the government not giving in to Marcus Rashford, the millionaire footballer, telling us that we need to spend more money on those free school meal vouchers. Do you think the government should U-turn?
Well, first of all, the government put 63 million to local government to deliver for those families.
It wasn't ring fenced, and the money's already been spent elsewhere. You know that. Your Tory councillors have said that.
So my local authority of Warwickshire County Council is continuing it for this half term and for Christmas, as are other local authorities. We also were the first government, a Conservative government, to conduct a pilot on holiday activities and food programmes. 50,000 children this summer at a cost of £9 million. We backed the breakfast programmes at £35 million. And of course, the biggest support is £9 billion through the welfare system to those families that most need it. We've got to take the learnings from those pilots, look at how we deliver this through local government. And as the Prime Minister said, no child will go hungry at Christmas. Rightly so, in my view.
Okay, just finally, I want to ask about Prince Harry. He said that he's learned to recognise his unconscious bias by, he says, living a day or week in my wife's shoes. He said it was only then that he was able to understand the term. Are you unconsciously biased?
We all are, I think. I spent many, to an extent. I think it's something that I did a lot of work on when I was running YouGov. We all are creatures of habit in many ways and are molded by our environments. And there are bias, especially if your skin is brown like mine or black, that sometimes you don't notice at all. If you are from other communities, but you do when you are a black woman or man or a brown woman or man, that people sort of casual bias, if I can call it that. This country, by the way, at the same time, is probably the greatest country on earth in dealing with this stuff. I represent a seat that is 98.6% white, affluent, middle class. Yet they voted for an immigrant from Iraq called Nadhim Zahawi as their member of parliament and their champion in parliament, I hope. So there are some really great things to learn from our values and what we do brilliantly as a nation, but also we can always do better. And I think Prince Harry's right to at least be self-conscious enough to look at how his wife is treated and learn from it.
But he was implying, I think, a white unconscious bias. You were saying even you, as an Asian man, that you were Iraqi man, sorry, that you were have unconscious bias. This is for all races, you believe.
Well,
so black people could be unconsciously biased against other races as well, for instance.
Let me give you another area. Look, if you look at the the leaderships of the civil service, or even politics or business, we tend to hire people that we're more familiar with and are similar to ourselves, and actually you have to work quite hard to come out of your comfort zone and do better on that. And I know many perm secretaries are passionate about this, to change the way we hire within the civil service. I backed a program where we were taking interns from the cohort of looked after children as they leave care, and that's now expanded to 500 very successful young men and women who would have probably not got a chance to work in the civil service if someone hadn't said, look, we ought to focus on these groups of young people that are disadvantaged and see if we can bring them into the civil service.
Okay, Nadhim Zahawi, lovely to talk to you. Business Minister Nadhim Zahawi.